Logan Carter gripped the worn leather steering wheel of his dusty pickup as he pulled into the gravel lot of Mike's Roadhouse. The neon sign buzzed faintly, casting a dim red glow over the cracked pavement. A roadside bar in the heart of Kentucky. It wasn't anything fancy, just a place for truckers, locals, and drifters looking to unwind with a cold beer and a quiet corner. He killed the engine and let out a slow breath. 1 week home. After 3 tours overseas, he wasn't sure what to make of civilian life anymore. The world felt different, quieter, slower, but his mind was still wired for chaos. He wasn't looking for conversation, wasn't looking for trouble. Just a moment to sit, think, and maybe feel normal again. The bar smelled of aged wood, spilled whiskey, and a faint trace of cigarette smoke lingering from a time before the smoking ban. The jukebox in the corner crooned an old Johnny Cash tune, barely audible over the hum of conversation and the occasional clack of pool balls. Logan took it all in as he stepped inside. Same old scene, same old faces. A couple of regulars huddled over their drinks at the bar, a few loners nursed beers in the dim light, and a group of men laughed loudly near the dartboard. He moved toward a corner booth, the seat cracked with time and use, positioning himself where he had a clear view of the room. His boots scuffed against the wooden floor as he slid onto the worn leather cushion. The weight of his camouflage jacket blended into the dim ambiance. But the scuffed sneakers on his feet were out of place, comfortable, practical, but an odd contrast to the rest of him. Logan ordered water. Not beer, not whiskey, just water. He sipped it slowly, letting his thoughts drift to home. His mother's cooking, his niece's laughter, the familiar creak of the front porch swing. The life he had left behind. The life he was trying to return to. Then the door slammed open. A gust of cool night air swept through the bar as 6 men strode in, their boots heavy against the floorboards. They were older, dressed in worn leather jackets adorned with patches and insignias that marked them as veterans. Their laughter filled the space, loud and unfiltered. But something in their presence sent a ripple through the room. Logan didn't look up. Didn't need to. He could feel the shift in the air. The night had just changed. The heavy wooden door swung shut with a dull thud, sealing off the quiet hum of the Kentucky night. Logan kept his eyes on his glass, but his senses sharpened. Years of training had hardwired him to notice shifts in energy, and this was one of those moments. The 6 men fanned out as they entered, their presence filling the space like a storm rolling in. Their laughter was loud, boisterous, too much for a place like this. They belonged, but they wanted everyone to know it. The patches on their jackets bore the insignias of different military units, faded from time, but still clear enough to send a message. We've been there. We've served. Logan recognized the type. He had seen them before in bars like this. In small towns where service meant something. Where a uniform still carried weight. Some veterans found camaraderie in their past, a brotherhood that never faded. Others wore it like a badge of superiority, measuring every man they met against their own experiences. Wayne Mitchell, the burly leader with salt and pepper stubble and tired, piercing eyes, stopped mid-laugh. His gaze locked onto Logan, and something in his expression shifted, curiosity laced with suspicion. Logan didn't move. He felt their eyes now, scanning him, breaking him down. His boots, his jacket, the way he carried himself. But it was the sneakers that drew the longest looks. Wayne muttered something under his breath, and the others turned. One by one, their gazes landed on Logan. The easy laughter faded, replaced by a low murmur. Recognition? Doubt? Judgment? It didn't matter. Logan knew that kind of look. They weren't just staring. They were evaluating. Wayne took a slow step toward the bar, never breaking eye contact. His boots thudded against the wooden floor, deliberate, heavy. His group followed, closing ranks near him, their conversation dropping to a hushed exchange. The bartender, an older man with lines etched deep into his face from years of watching nights like this unfold, glanced at Logan, then at the group. He didn't say a word, but his posture tensed. He saw what was coming. Logan exhaled slowly, steadying himself. He'd been through worse. At the bar, the group huddled closer, their voices dropping to a whisper. Every now and then, one of them would glance his way. A chuckle. A shake of the head. They had already decided something about him. One of the younger men in the group, thinner, wiry, leaned in, muttering something that made the man next to him laugh a sharp, dismissive sound that carried across the room. Wayne didn't laugh. He just stared. Logan took another sip of water, ignoring the itch in his muscles that told him to be ready. He had seen nights like this play out before. Words, stares, the slow build of something just waiting to boil over. He set his glass down. The night wasn't going to stay quiet much longer. The low hum of conversation barely covered the growing tension in the room. Logan felt it pressing against him like the weight of an incoming storm. He had seen it before, the slow unraveling of restraint, the moment when harmless words turned into something else. Wayne Mitchell leaned against the bar, nursing his beer, but his attention never left Logan. His fingers drummed lazily against the counter, his expression unreadable. Then, without looking away, he said something to the man beside him. Another laugh. Another shake of the head. Logan didn't bite. He had nothing to prove to these men. But they weren't going to let it go. Wayne pushed off the bar, adjusting his jacket as he strode toward Logan's table. His boots thudded against the wooden floor with slow, deliberate steps. The other men followed. Not close enough to look threatening, not yet, but enough to make it clear that this wasn't going to be a casual chat. Logan didn't move, didn't flinch. He had been under worse pressure before, had stared down men with far more dangerous intent. Wayne stopped a few feet from his table, tilting his head as if studying something peculiar. "Nice uniform," he said, his voice dripping with something just shy of mockery. "Where'd you get it, a Halloween store?" The men behind him chuckled, low and mean. Logan met Wayne's stare, his face impassive. He had heard worse. Much worse. "It's mine," Logan said evenly. "Earned it." Wayne let out a small, disbelieving scoff, exchanging a look with his crew. "Earned it? Huh?" He took a step closer, eyes narrowing. "That's funny, 'cause I've seen plenty of real soldiers. And none of them wear sneakers with their fatigues." Another snicker from behind him. Logan remained still, his expression unreadable, but his muscles coiled beneath the surface. "You trying to play dress up?" Wayne continued. "Looking for a free drink? A little sympathy?" Logan exhaled slowly. They wanted a reaction. They weren't going to get one. "I don't need sympathy," he said, his voice steady. "And I don't need a free drink." Wayne's smirk widened. But there was something sharper in it now, something calculated. "You don't look like a soldier to me," he said, leaning in slightly. The stale scent of beer and cigarettes clung to his breath. "Where's your boots? Your tags? Hell, you probably don't even know how to salute properly." Behind him, one of the younger men grinned. "Bet he couldn't tell us the first thing about basic training," he added. "Yeah," another chimed in, "probably never seen a battlefield in his life." The group erupted in laughter again, the sound grating against the steady hum of the jukebox. Logan's fingers tightened slightly around his glass, but his face remained unreadable. He had learned long ago when to engage, and when to let a fight die before it started. But something about this, the smugness, the ignorance, the audacity, rubbed him raw. Still, he kept his voice calm, measured, controlled. "I don't need to prove anything to you," he said, his tone firm but even. The laughter stopped for a beat. Wayne's expression darkened, his smirk faltering just slightly before he recovered. He took another step closer, looming over the table now, his large frame blocking out the dim glow of the neon lights. "You think you're some kind of hero?" he muttered, voice low and laced with disdain. "Walking in here like you belong?" He leaned in further, just enough to invade Logan's space. "I don't think you do." For the first time since the exchange had started, the room fell silent. The bartender, who had been pouring a drink, hesitated mid-pour. The regulars near the pool table glanced up, sensing the shift. A beat of stillness. Logan met Wayne's gaze without flinching, his expression unreadable. Then, in a voice that carried just enough weight to cut through the tension, he said, "I served 3 tours overseas." The words weren't loud, they didn't have to be. And for the first time, Wayne hesitated. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Logan to see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. But pride was a stubborn thing. Wayne scoffed. "Yeah? Prove it." The room held its breath. And just like that, the night was heading somewhere Logan hadn't planned. The bar had gone quiet. The only sound left was the soft hum of the jukebox, the faint clinking of ice in a forgotten glass. Every set of eyes in the room flicked between Logan and Wayne, waiting, watching. Logan sat still, his expression unreadable, his breathing steady. He'd been here before. Not in this bar, not with these men, but in situations just like this. Situations where a wrong word, a wrong move, could shift everything in an instant. Wayne wasn't backing down. His smirk had faded, replaced by something sharper. He wasn't just pushing anymore, he was demanding a reaction. "Show us your tags," Wayne repeated, his voice low and slow, stretching each word like a challenge. "Otherwise, you're nothing but a liar." Logan's jaw tightened slightly, but his hand stayed loose, relaxed on the table. He didn't move for his pocket. He didn't make any sudden gestures, because he knew. Men like Wayne weren't looking for proof. They were looking for a fight. And Logan had spent enough years surviving real battles to know that you never gave the enemy what they wanted. The air was thick with anticipation. One of Wayne's men shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between his leader and Logan. The doubt was creeping in. They weren't as sure anymore, Wayne noticed. And he hated it. The smirk returned, but it was different now. Forced. Hollow. "You got a smart mouth," he muttered, tilting his head. "Let's see if it's as quick as your fists." Then he moved. Fast, but not fast enough. His hand shot forward, fingers curling around the collar of Logan's jacket, but it was a mistake. Because Logan had already seen it coming. He didn't think, he reacted. In a single fluid motion, he sidestepped the grab, his own hand snapping up, catching Wayne's wrist mid-air. Before Wayne could even process what had happened, Logan twisted hard. The shift in leverage was immediate. Logan stepped forward, using Wayne's own momentum against him, spinning him and slamming him chest first against the edge of the table. The impact sent a ripple of sound through the room, a sharp gasp, a glass toppling over, a chair scraping backward. Wayne let out a strangled grunt, his free hand gripping the table for balance, but Logan wasn't holding him with aggression. "Just control." "Don't," Logan said quietly, his voice steady, unwavering. "You don't want this." Wayne struggled, but the way Logan had his arm locked made movement pointless. He was pinned, his own weight working against him. His crew froze. They had never seen him handled like this. One of them took a step forward, then hesitated. "Hey, man," the wiry one Ethan muttered, hands half raised. "Let him go. He didn't mean nothing by it." Logan's eyes flicked up, locking onto Ethan's. "He came at me," Logan said, voice calm but unyielding. "You saw it." Ethan swallowed hard, nodding. Yeah, I saw." Wayne let out a frustrated growl, still trying to pull free. But Logan didn't budge. He wasn't applying more force than necessary, just enough to make a point. Then he leaned in, just slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You don't know who you're messing with." For a moment, Wayne stopped struggling. The tension in his body shifted from fight to realization. This wasn't some kid playing soldier. This was a man who had seen war, who had lived it, and who had survived it. The weight of that truth settled between them, thick and undeniable. Wayne exhaled sharply, his pride warring with common sense. And common sense finally won. Logan released him in one controlled motion, stepping back, giving Wayne room to regain whatever dignity he had left. Wayne staggered slightly but straightened, rolling his shoulder, avoiding Logan's eyes. Avoiding everyone's eyes. Then the sneer returned, not as confident, not as sharp, but still there. "You'll pay for this," Wayne muttered under his breath, voice dripping with forced bravado. Logan didn't react. Didn't need to, because he already knew the fight was over, but Wayne wasn't finished. Not yet. One of his men, one too nervous to step in but eager to make himself useful, pulled out his phone. A few quick taps. Then, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yeah, we've got a guy here impersonating a soldier. And he just assaulted my friend." The weight in Logan's chest settled deep. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the thick Kentucky night. And just like that, this wasn't just a bar fight anymore. The distant wail of sirens cut through the thick Kentucky night, growing louder with each passing second. Inside Mike's roadhouse, the tension was suffocating. Wayne stood rigid, rubbing his wrist where Logan had pinned him, his face flushed with barely contained anger. His crew shifted uneasily, some glancing toward the door, others staring at Logan as if still trying to make sense of what had just happened. Logan, however, remained still, controlled, focused. He had been in situations like this before, where perception was everything, where one wrong move could shift the outcome in an instant. He wasn't worried about the truth. He knew what had happened, and so did everyone in the room. But truth didn't always win. Not when pride and ego were involved. The sirens came to a halt outside the bar, and seconds later, the door swung open. 2 officers stepped inside, the first one broad-shouldered, his uniform crisp, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting the dim neon light. Sergeant Daniels. The second, a woman with sharp, watchful eyes, scanned the room as if reading the situation before a word had even been spoken. Officer Reyes. Their presence alone silenced the last murmurs in the bar. Daniels took a step forward, his voice steady but firm. "We got a call about an altercation. Somebody want to tell us what happened?" Wayne was the first to speak. He pointed a finger at Logan, his voice thick with indignation. "That guy assaulted me. He's impersonating a soldier." A beat of silence. Then, a scoff from the bartender. Daniel's expression didn't change, but his jaw tensed slightly. Reyes turned to Logan. "That true?" she asked, her tone measured. Logan met her gaze. Steady. Unshaken. "No, ma'am," he said, his voice even. "This man confronted me because he didn't believe I served. When he grabbed me, I defended myself." Wayne let out a harsh laugh. "That's a lie," he snapped. "Look at him. No boots, no tags. Probably never spent a day in uniform. Ask him to prove it." Reyes tilted her head slightly, studying Logan. Looking past the accusation. Past the words. Then she turned to the bartender. "Did you see what happened?" The bartender, a man who had been pouring drinks at Mike's Roadhouse for more years than he cared to count, set down his rag and folded his arms. "Yeah," he said. "I saw everything. Hank over there," he nodded toward Wayne, "threw the first punch. Logan just handled himself. Didn't start nothing. Didn't escalate nothing." A murmur rippled through the bar. A few nods. A couple of voices muttering quiet agreement. Wayne's jaw tightened. Daniels turned back to Logan, his voice neutral. "Do you have any proof of service, sir?" Logan nodded once and gestured toward the duffel bag beside his chair. Slow. Measured. No sudden movements. "In there," he said. "My uniform, my ID." Daniels crouched down, unzipped the bag, and carefully pulled out the neatly folded uniform. Badges. Insignias. The name patch reading Carter. Reyes took it from him, inspecting it for a long moment before nodding. "Authentic. Real." "You're clear," Daniels said, standing up and handing the uniform back. His voice was firm, but this time, with a touch of respect. "We appreciate your cooperation." Logan nodded once, slipping the uniform back into the bag. But Wayne wasn't done. "You're just gonna take his word for it?" he growled, stepping forward. He could have faked all that. This time, Reyes turned to Wayne with a look so sharp it cut through whatever was left of his bravado. "Enough," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "From what I've heard, you instigated this. And you're lucky he's not pressing charges for assault." Wayne's mouth opened, then snapped shut. For the first time that night, he looked uncertain. Daniels glanced between the 2 men before stepping back, adjusting his belt. "Here's how this is gonna go," he said. "We'll file a report on the incident. If you," he nodded toward Wayne, "want to pursue your claims, you're welcome to do so. But you should know that filing a false report is a serious offense." Wayne swallowed hard. He knew when he was cornered. Finally, he let out a harsh breath and muttered, "This ain't over." Logan didn't react, didn't need to. Daniels and Reyes exchanged one last glance before turning toward the door. The officers stepped out, the red and blue lights from their cruisers flashing against the bar windows. The tension lingered, but the fight was over. Wayne's crew shuffled awkwardly, the weight of their leader's humiliation settling over them like a thick fog. One by one, they started moving toward the door, their earlier bravado gone. Wayne lingered for just a second longer, casting Logan one last glare. Then he turned and walked out. And just like that, the bar exhaled. Logan sat back down, his drink still untouched. Around him, patrons whispered, casting sidelong glances his way. Not with suspicion. With quiet respect. The days passed quietly after the incident at Mike's Roadhouse. Logan Carter had put it behind him, or at least tried to. He had seen worse, faced worse, survived worse. A bar fight over pride and suspicion wasn't worth the energy. But that didn't mean it didn't linger. Some things just stuck with you. Now, standing in his driveway, he wiped the sweat from his brow as he tightened a bolt under the hood of his old pickup. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the gravel. The smell of warm oil and dust thick in the air. Then the sound of a motorcycle. Logan didn't react at first. Just kept working, listening as the engine rumbled closer, then softened as it rolled onto the gravel. Slower now. Cautious. A low hum of tires. The slight grind of brakes, then silence. Logan straightened and turned. The rider had already cut the engine and was stepping off his bike. Thin, wiry, a little hunched in the shoulders like he wasn't sure if he should be here. Logan recognized him immediately. Ethan Ross, one of Wayne's men. The one who had hesitated. The one who had seen. Logan didn't say anything. Just watched as Ethan pulled off his helmet, ran a hand through thinning hair, and took a slow step forward. "Hey," Ethan said, his voice quieter than Logan had ever heard it. Logan exhaled, tossing the rag over his shoulder. "Didn't expect to see you here." Ethan let out something close to a chuckle, but it was strained, awkward. Yeah, I figured." He hesitated, glancing down at the dirt like the right words might be written there. Then, with a breath, he met Logan's eyes. I wanted to come by. Say I'm sorry. For what happened." Logan didn't react right away. Just let the words hang there for a moment. Ethan shifted, stuffing his hands into his jacket pockets like a man suddenly unsure of what to do with them. "You were part of it," Logan said evenly. Ethan nodded, face flushing with guilt. "Yeah, I know." He let out a breath. "I didn't stop it, and I should have." Silence settled between them, the kind that weighed more than words. Logan had heard apologies before, some forced, some genuine. This one felt different. Ethan cleared his throat, glancing toward the truck like it might give him an easier way out of this conversation. "Wayne. He's got a way of riling people up. I've known him a long time. It's easy to just go along with him. But," he sighed, "that doesn't make it right." Logan studied him. The nervous stance. The tight grip on his own fingers. "Why now?" Logan asked. Not accusing, just curious. Ethan looked down, scuffing his boot against the gravel. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said, voice almost too quiet. Then he shrugged, giving a weak chuckle. "And because, seeing you handle yourself the way you did, it made me realize how wrong we were. You didn't deserve any of that." Another pause. Then, "What do you want from me, Ethan?" Ethan looked up, his expression caught between regret and something else, hope. "Maybe. Nothing," he admitted. "Maybe forgiveness. Maybe just to know I ain't the same man I was that night." He swallowed hard. "I've seen a lot of hate in my life, and I don't want to add to it anymore." Logan let out a slow breath, considering that. He could have turned him away. Could have let the past sit where it was. Let Ethan carry his guilt without offering him a way to put it down. But that wasn't who Logan was. He wasn't in the business of holding on to things that didn't serve him. Finally, he nodded. "I appreciate you coming here." Ethan blinked, like he hadn't been expecting that. "It doesn't erase what happened," Logan continued. "But it's a start." Ethan exhaled, shoulders sagging with relief. "Yeah," he said, nodding. "Yeah, I get that." A beat passed. Then, without another word, Ethan reached out his hand. Logan looked at it, then shook it. Brief. Firm. Real. Ethan stepped back, letting out a slow breath. "Thanks, man. I mean it." He climbed onto his bike, sliding his helmet back on. The engine roared to life, and for a second, Logan thought that was it. But then, just before pulling away, Ethan lifted his visor. "I don't know if Wayne's ever gonna get it," he said. "But I do." Logan nodded. That was enough. And as Ethan rode off, kicking up dust against the setting sun, Logan felt something shift. Maybe the past couldn't be rewritten. But sometimes, people could. The sound of Ethan's motorcycle faded into the distance, swallowed by the quiet hum of the Kentucky evening. Logan Carter stood in his driveway for a long moment, watching the dust settle in the fading light. He wasn't sure what he had expected from that conversation, or if he had expected it at all. But something about it sat differently. He had faced plenty of fights in his life. The ones overseas had been loud, brutal, and merciless. The ones back home? Quieter. Subtler. But no less real. Some battles weren't fought with fists or firepower. Some were fought in bars, in conversations, in the way a person chose to carry themselves after the damage had already been done. And in the end, those battles mattered just as much. With a sigh, Logan wiped his hands on the rag slung over his shoulder and turned back to his truck. The old Ford needed more work just like everything else in life. He leaned over the engine, adjusting a bolt, letting the familiar motion steady his thoughts. Then the crunch of gravel. Another vehicle. His hands stilled. A flicker of tension tightening in his chest, before he forced it down. Not everything was a threat. Logan turned just in time to see an old blue pickup, rolling to a stop at the edge of his driveway. A long pause, then the door swung open. Wayne Mitchell stepped out. Logan exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders before leaning against the truck. He wasn't in the mood for another fight. Wayne didn't move right away. He stood by the truck, hands on his hips, looking at the ground like it might give him the words he was searching for. Logan just watched. Waited. Finally, Wayne met his eyes. And for the first time since that night at Mike's Roadhouse, there was no challenge in his gaze. "Ethan came to see you," Wayne said gruffly. "Not a question. Just a statement." Logan nodded. "Yeah." Wayne let out a breath, shaking his head. "Figured he might." Silence stretched between them. The kind that carried weight. Then, after a long pause, Wayne sighed and stepped closer. "I was wrong about you," he said. The words came slow, like they were being dragged out of him. Like he hated saying them, but knew he had to. "I've seen guys try to play soldier before. Seen people steal what they didn't earn." His jaw tightened. "Figured you were one OFEM. Logan didn't answer. Didn't need to. Wayne let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head. "But you ain't, are you?" "No," Logan said simply. Wayne let that settle. Then he nodded, like he had already known the answer. "You handled yourself like a soldier," Wayne admitted. "Not just in that fight. In how you carried yourself." And, he exhaled. "I should have seen it sooner." Logan studied him for a moment. This wasn't easy for the man. Pride was a hell of a thing. Wayne shifted on his feet, scratching at the back of his neck. "I don't expect you to shake my damn hand," he muttered. "And I sure as hell don't expect you to forgive me. But," he hesitated, "I just wanted you to know." Logan watched him carefully. Wayne wasn't the type to say things he didn't mean. And maybe this wasn't a full apology, but it was something. Finally, Logan gave a slow nod. "Fair enough." Wayne exhaled, like he had been holding something tight in his chest and had finally let it go. Then, without another word, he turned, climbed back into his truck, and drove off. Logan stayed where he was, watching the old pickup disappear down the road. He didn't feel vindicated. Didn't feel like he had won anything. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about what came after. He turned back to his truck, wiping his hands once more before setting the wrench down. As the sun dipped below the trees, a calm settled over him. He knew there would always be people like Wayne. People quick to judge, quick to challenge, unwilling to accept what they didn't understand. But there would also be people like Ethan, people who were willing to change, willing to learn, willing to be better. And that was enough. Logan picked up the wrench again, rolling his shoulders before leaning back over the engine. Some things took time to fix. Some things were never truly finished. But that didn't mean you stopped trying. Life is full of battles, some loud and obvious, others quiet and unseen. For veterans like Logan, the fights don't always end when the uniform comes off. The real battles often happen in the places we least expect, in the judgments of others, in the weight of misunderstanding, and in the choice to stand firm or walk away. This story teaches us that strength isn't just about physical power, it's about composure, integrity, and knowing which fights are worth engaging in. Logan never let his pride dictate his actions. He didn't need to prove his worth to anyone, and that's a lesson many of us can carry forward. Another important message? People can change. Not everyone will, but some like Ethan are willing to grow. And sometimes, the quiet acceptance of truth, like Wayne's reluctant admission, is its own kind of victory. As we navigate life, we must remember, not every fight is fought with fists, and not every enemy stays an enemy. The most meaningful battles are the ones we fight within ourselves, the ones that push us to be better, to forgive, and to let go of what no longer serves us. Life is full of lessons. And sometimes, the toughest battles aren't fought on the battlefield but in the way we face judgment, forgiveness, and change. Logan's story is a reminder that integrity speaks louder than pride, and true strength lies in how we carry ourselves. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel to share more powerful stories of resilience, honor, and redemption.